Friends, good morning. How are you? Good to be here again on Star Travelers. Edison, how are you?
Very good, Ivan. Very good, very good,
Very happy. Talking about these topics that we like so much, right? Well, we've been talking obviously about Genesis in the previous programs with some fabulous guests. And there is a theme within Genesis and within all this theme, the theme of mysteries, and that is the underworld, right? The underworld is mysterious. I have always been very interested, for example, in the underworld of the Mayan culture, right? When you go to Mexico, these cenotes that were, let's say, a meteorite rain that hit the earth many years ago, these cenotes were created. But then in these cenotes today, they have discovered a lot of information that the Mayas had down there. We said in a previous program that the Mayas do not know each other, Mayan cemeteries, and it seems that these cenotes are an access to the underworld. But today we are not going to talk about the Mayan underworld. Today we are going to talk about some caves in Ecuador, right? What are those caves called?
The cave of the TAYOS, Ivan. The cave of the TAYOS.
Tell me a little bit about this cave of the Stocks. Where is it exactly? How do you get there?
Look, in Santiago, Ecuador, is a cave that is in the jungle on the border between Peru and Ecuador. It is a very enigmatic cave. The English, including Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, who walked on the moon, traveled with a group of 65 scientists to that cave. Why did he travel to this cave? Because according to them, it is a cave where the origin of humanity would be, where he opened a library, the origin of humanity. It is a very spectacular cave, enigmatic, with a lot of information.
In fact, we have always seen, and one sees it in the Louvre Museum, in the London Museum, in the Berlin Museum, we see the Sumerian tablets. Apparently, the Sumerian tablets are the oldest information in the world, where written in Sumerian is the whole genesis of how the earth was created. They speak, for example, of the glaciation, of Noah, etc., of paradise. But in these caves, particularly those tablets or that information appears in a metallic material, it is no longer in rock, right? Yes.
Indeed, look, to get to the Cueva de los Tayos, Ivan, you have to spend 4 days in the jungle, through rivers, and you have to go down a cavern. That is, you have to be a mountaineer to go down a cavern 130 meters deep. And to be there, to be able to walk 5 kilometers inside the cave, to be there for at least 5 days.
A marvel. So it is not the one who wants to go, but the one who can go.
Whoever can go,
you need
whoever's
courage,
ready.
You need to be intrepid, to be ready to go to this cave.
Imagine that the 65 scientists who in the year 76 went with Neil Armstrong, they went with equipment weighing more than 65 tons. With equipment, going through rivers, going through jungle. What is there in the Tayos cave that is so interesting even for the astronaut?
That's what we're going to find out in today's Journey to the Stars program. We are going to have a very special guest. Who is our guest?
His name is Raphael Calderon. He's an entrepreneur, he's an archaeologist, and he's also been down 9 times to the cave of the Tayos.
So you can't miss him. We are back in his program Journey to the Stars, where today we are going to travel to the cave of the Tayos, the underworld. The underworld in Ecuador, the underworld also in what could be the Amazon jungle. We will be back. We come from the stars and we travel to the stars. That's why this program of Traveling to the Stars. Today we are going to have a very special guest because we are going to talk about the Cueva del Tayo in Ecuador, right? And our guest is Raphael Calderon. Who is Raphael Calderon?
Well, Raphael Calderon, for the viewers, is an Ecuadorian businessman. He has been down 9 times to the Cueva de los Tayos. He is a very enthusiastic person. He is an archaeologist. He has been to Egypt. He has made expeditions to Egypt, to the high Peruvian Amazon, Haiti. He has wanted to discover the origin of humanity. That has been his dream since he was young. And he is an archaeologist. He is an archaeologist.
Yes, we know precisely about the Cueva de los Tayos. And the beauty of it all is that today we have Raphael Calderon here in Journey to the Stars. Raphael, how are you? Welcome to Journey to the Stars.
I send a cordial greeting to the program Journey to the Stars of the Coosmovision channel, especially to its director Ivan Obando and Edison Flores.
One would like to ask Raphael, what is the secret of the cave? Tell me, that is, why is this cave so enigmatic, Edison?
Look, Ivan, all the English, who are the ones who have been most interested in the cave, remember that Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth, had the largest collection of UFOs, of writers about extraterrestrials. After his death, they discovered, let's say, that collection. He has the largest collection in the world on mystery, on the origin of humanity, on the Nunaki theme, on extraterrestrials, on UFOs. Why would the English have so much interest, for example, in these themes and also in the cave of the TAYOS? It is a very big enigma.
One enigma and another enigma that I think Raphael is going to tell us a little more about is the subject of anthropomorphic objects. What exactly does anthropomorphic mean?
Anthropomorphic is an archaeological term which is human in appearance, but it is not human.
That is, it is, let's say, how we could describe how we imagine extraterrestrials, that once we imagine them to be gray, others draconian, and so on.
In other words, here we have been told a lot in ancient cultures about ancient astronauts, that is, stone figurines in the shape of astronauts, which we found in Mexico. We found them here in Colombia, in the Tomaco Pacific culture, but they were also found in the cave of the TAYOS. But in addition to that, a large cave was found with more than 70,000 metallic pieces, with, let's say, inscriptions.
Imagine
older than Sumerian.
That is older than Sumerian, which I suppose is a writing, which is the first writing, even before the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and which is obviously a cuneiform writing. That cuneiform writing is not based on phonetics, nor on vowels, but on accents. So it shows, through the combination, it shows you a bird, and it shows you, in other words, it describes the way of reading by actions. I think that whoever did the translation of that Sumerian Cuneiform writing, well, Zechariah Hitchin, who was a Jew, was the one who made all this discovery. But come on, we are talking about the subject, and here the subject is the cave of the TAYOS, and Raphael is the one who is really going to tell us. He is the expert because he has been there many times. He is the one who is really going to tell us why this cave is so mysterious.
This place has a fascinating history, since in 1965 the Hungarian-Argentine researcher Juan Moritz arrived in our country in search of a subway world where a civilization that would be one of the oldest and perhaps the origin of humanity would be living. We are talking about the Magyar civilization. He believed that this civilization originated here in our country, since some of the place names of the different sites that exist in the country have roots in the Magyar language, which is a language that is currently dead and disappeared, and of which Moritz was an expert and understood it very well. The surprising thing about this story is that Moritz manages to connect with some of the indigenous cultures living in Ecuador, such as the Shachiras Indians, whose chiefs spoke this sacred language for them, and for Moritz it was really a surprising, fascinating situation, and he told these Indians that they came to look for this subway world where this civilization lived down there in the earth. These Indians told him that indeed this place existed here in Ecuador, and they took them to the jungle, to the east of Ecuador, and there Moritz contacted the Shhuar Indians, who also spoke Magyar. They finally took Moritz to some caves, and he, following the indications of the Magyar myths, managed to find, according to what he narrates, a civilization unknown to mankind living there inside the caves, and this civilization would be guarding great treasures. Among some things would be a metallic library engraved in different metals, including gold, in whose interior would be or would contain the true history of humanity, a history unknown to all of us, which speaks of cultures or civilizations that appeared thousands of years ago and that appeared and then disappeared. Moritz comes out of the caves and tries to make this discovery known to mankind, and he talked with the government of Argentina, with the government of Ecuador. He even contacted the high leaders of the Mormon religion, and finally with the English government. but the requirements that Moritz asked for so that he could make this discovery known were never met.
Well, Edison, you who live near La Ceja, and I recommend everyone to go to Cerro del Capiru. For me, the Cerro del Capiru, particularly in this area where we live, for me it is a hill of light. For me it is a very special spot. But getting to Cerro del Capiru is relatively easy. Reaching the Thai cave is difficult.
Isn't it too difficult, Ivan? 5 days in the Amazon jungle, it is a jungle on the border with the Peruvian jungle. By river too. In other words, it is a 5-day expedition plus the descent through the cave, which is 130 meters deep. You have to be a real mountaineer to go down there.
Raphael, tell us, and thank you very much again for sharing your knowledge with others. Tell us how this adventure has been, because you have already been down to this cave 9 times. Tell us a little bit about the adventure of getting to the TAYOS cave. Of the TAYOS, sorry. I am a little...
TAYOS. Now,
the
Ivan,
cave of the
why do
TAYOS.
they call it the cave of the TAYOS? A question, because there are little birds called TAYOS. Okay. They, shall we say, hide in these caves. That's wonderful. It's not bats hiding, it's little birds called TAYOS.
When you say you have to go down, I imagine it as a cenote too.
Yes, a cenote.
In a way, it's like a cenote, because you are at the top. It's like a hole, and you have to go down 106 meters deep. A beauty.
Raphael, tell us about it. I have had the privilege of visiting the Cueva de los Tayos for more than 9 occasions, including some of them I have stayed for more than 3 days inside the caverns doing different types of research. Even in the area, we have been able to find a new cave and a new access to this intraterrestrial world that are still unknown and that are not registered. Additionally, I have been able to visit this wonderful place since the year 93, and the last time I was there was in the year 2014 with the Spanish filmmaker Miguel Garzón, who signed a documentary called TAYOS, A World Under Your Feet. Getting to the TAYOS cave is not an easy process. It is really complicated, it is difficult. We are talking about the fact that the place is located in the jungle, in the Amazon jungle of Ecuador. It is a place where it rains a lot, and where one walks are paths full of mud, dirt, and because of the constant rains, they become real muddy places that make access very difficult. And even the orography is quite irregular, with small mountains that go up and down, leading to a supreme effort to get there. You even have to cross some rivers that are torrential, and all this really makes it difficult and complicated access to the caves.
Well, and one asks oneself the following question, because it is finally difficult to get there when you already know where it is, but who was the first one to get there? I mean, how did they discover this cave? I imagine it must have been that the indigenous people of the area somehow had to tell the story.
Now, there are some indigenous people called the Indokwar, who already knew about the cave, but they had not dared to explore it, because it was considered sacred by their ancestors, since they said that the cave was 200 million years old. Now scientifically it is dated at 70,000 years, scientifically, but the Indokwar said,
it's enough for them to record it.
The other is mythology. Now, Juan Moritz, a Hungarian-Argentinian researcher, was the one who discovered the cave. He discovered the objects. He managed to reach, with the help of the Indochuar, to the metal library. And then he went to a notary in Quito, Ecuador to record, let's say, his discovery. That is very important.
Important,
Then,
of course, to register it.
from Juan Moritz comes Erich von Daniken, who together with Juan Moritz, this Hungarian-Argentinian, and together with Erich von Daniken, a Swiss who is the one of the theory of the ancient astronauts. He was the one who founded ancient aliens. They went there, discovered what was there, and he wrote the Book of the Gods, a bestseller, which sold more than 10 million copies all over Europe in the year 76.
How marvelous. So this cave is from what era?
At the time, well, they say
Well, excuse me, the era, we know from which era, but from which era it was discovered? More or less
that
in...
76, 74.
What? So, very recent, which means that there are a lot of things to investigate there. They're just
Now,
getting
let's-
started.
In mind, Ivan, that in those same years, the Nag Hammadi library was discovered, the Gnostic library, that in Egypt, the Gnostic books of the Nag Hammadi, and also the Essene texts of the Qumran were discovered in some caves. Everything has
I
been
imagine
discovered
it's the
in
dead
caves.
Kalmar, of course.
Sure, near the Dead Sea. But why did they discover this, Ivan? Because let's remember that the Library Alexandria, the Conspiracy of Darkness, destroyed more than 500,000 books. So I think that the light didn't stay. They hid this in different caves.
The light had to come out somewhere.
Yes.
Well, what are we going to talk about now? What is Raphael going to tell us now?
Well, what is Raphael going to tell us? How many times has he been to the TAYOS cave? What has he discovered there?
Yes, definitely. Edison, there is information, and the light of information is coming out somewhere. That is, nothing has been hidden between heaven and earth. But I want Raphael himself to tell us a little bit more about Eric Montaigne.
Who were his first?
Yes, exactly. Who were his first investigations? About Neil Armstrong, let's hear it from him. Who is the one who was really involved there?
Among the first researchers who delved into the subject of the cave of the TAYOS was the Swiss writer Erich von Däniken, famous for having written books such as Memories of the Future. He had access to a magazine in Ecuador, the magazine Vistazo, in which they interviewed Juan Moritz and he told his story. Then he decided to come to Ecuador in the year 73 and met with Juan Moritz, who told him his story, his discovery. Von Däniken was fascinated, surprised, and told Juan Moritz that he could get him the resources. He could connect with the people there in Europe, that they could give him just the economic resources so that he could make his expedition and make his discovery known to mankind, but he simply needed some kind of proof. So Moritz gave him some photographs of the inside of the caves, and with that material, Von Däniken left Ecuador and was never heard from again until one day, 2 years later, a book published by Von Däniken called The Gold of the Gods was published in Europe, which became a bestseller, since more than 10 million copies of this book were sold and translated into more than 10 languages, being really a success in bookstores worldwide. And with this, the Cave of the Stalks and the story of Moritz became known worldwide. One of these books reached the hands of some English researchers. Among others, we have Stan Hall, who approached Moritz and offered him, on behalf of the English government and the Queen of England, to carry out a British Ecuadorian expedition with the objective of making known the history of Moritz, with the objective of making known to mankind this discovery that he had made. The investment would be millionaire, and they would even put scientists from the University of Edinburgh at the disposal of Juan Moritz to carry out all the investigations. Unfortunately, at the last moment, they did not reach an agreement, since they did not meet all the requirements that Moritz asked for to make his discovery known, and so he did not accompany them on the expedition. The English, even to give security and seriousness to the expedition, they invited the astronaut Neil Armstrong, the first man to visit, to step on the moon, as an honorary member of the English expedition, who came in the year 75. They spent 30 days inside the caves. They took out some boxes according to their account, according to the people who were there, and then they left to England and never gave a report, never gave any detail of what they found or what they saw inside this cave system in the Cueva de los Tayos.
Well, and we see this site so spectacular, so enigmatic. But one thing is what one sees, one thing is what is materialized, but another thing is what is deeper, what is inside. What is inside is deeper, it is in the underworld. The underworld, where one begins to speak, for example, of the kingdom of Chambala, right? What we were talking about just now about the Mayan cenotes. There are other underworlds, right?
Well, let's keep in mind that the underworld is also called the intraterrestrial world, where those lost civilizations were hidden in those mythical floods that many sacred books tell us about, that all cultures tell us about. All cultures in the world speak of a universal deluge, that is to say, of a turning of the axis by an earthquake,
Creating a glaciation. So, it is not so complex, because people are used to the fact that the Earth makes this turn, isn't it? It's going like this. But it turns out that the Earth, as it makes this turn, is also starting to flip this way. So, what was the North Pole, if you look at this here, starts to shift. And what was more to the south starts to become more to the north, which simply means that what is above starts to melt. That is nothing. That is not apocalyptic. It is simply a process.
Which is even the mystery that we are seeing today in social networks that has become very viral. And it is the animals running in circles.
Exactly. That also because the magnetic axis of the Earth changes. Let's say the polar point changes. So, well, but that at that time that was not understood possibly, or maybe not understood more than we understand it. That generated that people took refuge in those caves and started to see things. But that is where I want to go. It is not what you will discover. It is not only the metallic or clay tablet. There are many more things in that underworld.
Now we have to take into account, you were talking about the Zambal in Tibet, that is the subway kingdom of Tibet, lost kingdom of Agarte that. Gobi Desert also. There is an intraterrestrial
Here in Colombia
kingdom.
there are.
Here in Colombia, for example, Yuratena Mountain, Huayca Mountain, or San Agustin, Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. Why do I say this? Because there are many legends and indigenous myths that speak that there are ancestors that disappeared in those mountains. So, look there. We also have...
Did they disappear or did they not disappear? Suddenly they crossed a portal. Didn't they? Like the case of, and watch out for this, because let's say that we know that those who follow this program like to investigate the case of Moses, who never died, and the case of Elijah, the prophet Elijah, who they say was rescued by a fiery ship, a chariot of fire. But let's let them tell us a little bit more about what is in these caves, which suddenly is what you don't see.
And who lives there.
In the different trips we made to the Cueva de los TAYOS, little by little we came in contact with the beings that inhabit the interior of this place, and the information we received is that there are two types of dwellers inside the caves. The first dwellers would have arrived 100,000 years ago from the cosmos. They were a group of extraterrestrial beings that had come from the constellation of Taurus, from the group of stars known as the Pleiades, and upon arriving to our world they opened tunnels and galleries and founded a sort of extraterrestrial base inside the Cueva de los Tallos. Years later, a second group would have arrived. About 12,000 years ago, a group of beings known as the Atlanteans had arrived, according to what we have been able to observe, see, and receive inside the caves. There were some islands located in the Atlantic Ocean, and there was a sort of planetary crisis, a series of earthquakes and earthquakes 12,000 years ago that ended up sinking these islands in the interior of the sea. And on top of that, there was a meteorite that fell into the sea. And on top of that, a meteorite fell about 12,000 years ago, generating a general planetary flood. And these beings, the Atlanteans, in order to take refuge from this cataclysm, we speak of the great universal deluge, as recorded in different religions. Some left Egypt, others left Europe, and others came to America, and those who arrived here in America entered Ecuador and went into the caverns in the subway world, there in these caverns that had been inhabited by these extraterrestrial beings of the folds, and there they founded an intraterrestrial city to survive the great catastrophe that occurred at that time.
On the subject of mysteries, religion, and beyond religion, also a series of characters. Because let's say that in these fathers, priests in general, have been people who in their own good have had the privilege of knowledge. I am talking about the Jesuits, I am talking about the Vatican Museum, of course. But let's talk about Father Kpie. Father Kpie is a Salesian priest, and he was the first one to receive these tablets, right?
He was sent to Ecuador by order of the Vatican. He is from the order of Don Bosco, a Salesian priest. And the Shhuar Indians began to share with him a series of elements, statuettes, metallic tablets, etc. He gathered more than 60,000 pieces in a museum. But what happened? When he had the pieces in that museum, the next day that museum was set on fire.
Conspiracy.
So see why this is so enigmatic.
Incredible, one begins to think about the Da Vinci Code, etc., etc., etc. But let Rafa tell us a little more about it. Raphael, tell us a little more about Father Kpie, right?
In 1923, the Vatican sent to Ecuador the Salesian priest Carlos Kpie with the purpose of acquiring here in our country objects belonging to the native cultures of Ecuador. That is why Father Kpie bought from the natives of the highlands as well as from the Ecuadorian East the different objects that they came to sell him. He also had contact with the natives of the area of Morona, Santiago, where the cave of the TAYOS is located, which are the Shhuar natives, and they also brought him a great number of objects to sell to Father Kpie. Kpie sent 3/4 of the objects brought to the Vatican, and 1/4 he kept with him. He accumulated so many objects that he had to found a museum that came to have about 60, which came to have about 60,000 pieces. Father Kpie affirmed that some pieces would have come from the cave of the TAYOS, but it was also well known in the city of Cuenca, where the museum of Father Kpie was located, that there were several archaeological findings in the province of Azuay, in the province of Cayar, and Father Kpie was an amateur archaeologist who accompanied him to inspect these archaeological findings. He was an amateur archaeologist who went with Father Kpie to inspect these archaeological discoveries, including one of the largest, a pyramid where countless objects were found that belonged to the Phoenician culture, the Sumerian culture, and some other cultures of the Middle East. But it was not in the cave of the TAYOS, but it was precisely in the Ecuadorian highlands. So the discoveries and the metallic library. The discoveries and the metallic library of Father Kpie came from several areas of the equator, and not only from the Cueva de los TAYOS.
When one speaks of tablets, and I in particular who love the Sumerian civilization, the Sumerian mythology, first thing you see in the Sumerian tablets is how they describe what they call the Edim. The Edim, which in the Catholic religion is the Eden, as they were an extraterrestrial civilization, they made an extraterrestrial civilization. They make a genetic combination and create a being called Adamo, isn't it? That they put him to live in the Eden. Then one begins to connect that with what one has read in the Bible. But when we go to these tablets, the tablets of Father Kpie, is it a little bit similar to Genesis, or is it a different Genesis?
Look, what is said about the tablets, and according to the data of the Shhuar Indians, the indigenous people of the area, is that the tablets speak of the true origin of humanity. Humanity did not originate in Genesis. Genesis comes after the flood, which is Sumer, that is the Anunnaki, which was after Atlantis and Lemuria. The tablets found there tell us about that antediluvian epoch, that is Lemuria, the Mu continent, which supposedly sank in the Pacific Ocean, the Mu continent, and Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. Let's say that there are many archaeological vestiges of that, but it turns out that scientifically in the world governments kind of reject what they do not understand. That is why they have not given so much importance to issues such as the cave of the TAYOS. Something that is not understood, some tablets that are not understood, some anthropomorphic elements, some statuettes, let's say, of stone, similar to extraterrestrial astronauts. Since they do not understand them, then they reject them.
I only have one observation. I agree with you, but I disagree on one point with what you said, and that is that previous or antediluvian, as they call it, was Adam, was Adam, obviously Noah, obviously Methuselah, and obviously Nooch, and after Noah come those that are after, and the Sumerians are antediluvian. Yes, I correct that. Exactly, but let Raphael tell us a little bit more about what has been found, about what these tablets say.
There is really very little left of Father Crespi's collection. Most of what is found today in the Museum of the Central Bank in the city of Cuenca are stone and ceramic objects, but most of the metallic tablets that Father Crespi collected have disappeared. Some say that they were burned in a fire, others were stolen and finally have disappeared, and what is currently known is that they are in private collections in different parts of the world, but they are already in the city of Cuenca. There are some people who have tried to interpret these tablets, among them the librarian Ruth Rodriguez Sotomayor. Librarian Ruth Rodriguez Sotomayor, who is an Ecuadorian, who is doing an excellent job regarding the interpretation of the symbols, and she is also affirming that in the equator came out cultures that finally founded civilizations in different parts of the world, as Moritz said, and according to this researcher and librarian, there would already exist all the evidence so that what she is affirming can be verified and that it is a reality. But unfortunately, the only thing that has remained are photographs regarding the collection of Father Crespi. Some photographs and tangible objects are almost non-existent.
To me, there are two characters in the world of cinema that attract my attention. One is Robin Williams, who is dead now, but who has some very profound films, and the other is Will Smith, who has super deep movies. And the question is, why is Will Smith so interested in the Cave of the TAYOS?
Well, show business after Neil Armstrong, who was also an astronaut, stepped on the moon, and was therefore someone very important for humanity. He was the first.
The first one.
After him follows Will Smith, as interested in the Cave of the TAYOS. It turns out that Will Smith has talked a lot about planet Earth, about taking care of planet Earth, about that spiritual part.
In fact, there is a very beautiful movie that he makes with his son about a theme that the Earth is ending and the sun survives. That is to say, the guy has it completely clear.
This guy has it clear. The National Geographic English version invited him to go to the Cueva de los Tayos. They have not gone there yet, but that is a project they have with National Geographic.
So watch out then, pending.
There was a report that the movie artist Will Smith would come to visit the Cave of the Stems of the Equator, but finally it was discovered that the National Geographic would also be accompanying Will Smith, but the English version of the National Geographic, so it is very curious that normally the English are behind this topic. The background shows that the governments know more than they say. They are aware of the existence of these issues, and they are trying to somehow control this information and even cover it up. So we do not have exact data that they really came to make some reports of the Schwartz friends who live in the area and who even own the land where the cave is located. It tells us that they simply went down, filmed a series of documentaries, and did nothing else. Nothing that should worry us, but we should really suspect that something may be thinking about doing with respect to the cave if it is coming from the English government.
Well, Edison, one that, let's say, I've traveled, you've traveled, and when one goes to these places that have so much energy, in India, in Egypt,
He gets Pascua.
Easter Island, Cusco, Machu Picchu, when one goes to all these places, you see many things. But the question one asks oneself is, what do you think, Rafa, is the teaching that the Cave of the Tayos leaves us?
Well, besides that, it has been said that many explorers of the Cueva de los Tayos, as they must be, they must have traveled 5 kilometers inside the cave. They have been there for several days. They have had experiences, to say the least, mind-blowing. Total. Astral experiences, experiences of contact with beings of light that leave them messages for humanity. In other words, they have had a series of quite profound experiences when they are down in the cave. We would say the same if we were in the pyramids of Egypt. There are people who get caught climbing the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, claustrophobia.
So it has touched me.
Others, for example, we have the energy and strength to climb up to the king's chamber, and we manage to connect it with the energy of the pyramid.
I managed to get into the sarcophagus, and they scolded me. And I had a meditation. That is, it is a privilege that life gave me, but that is the question, Raphael. What spiritual experience have you known, or have you been told that people have had there in the Cueva del Tayo?
In the 1980s, I had the opportunity to meet a group of people in Peru who had lived experiences of contact with beings who had lived experiences of contact with extraterrestrial beings through telepathy or mental communication. They became very well known worldwide, and we approached them and became part of the group, and we tried to replicate their experiences here in Peru. And we tried to replicate their experiences here in the equator. Then we also began to receive messages from these beings. Among the first things they told us was that here in the equator there were some caves that connected with an intraterrestrial world, that in the interior of the earth there would be intraterrestrial cities. When we asked these beings about their experiences, they told us that there were some caves in the equator that connected with an intraterrestrial world, that in the interior of the earth there would be intraterrestrial cities. When we asked them, these beings, the origin of these cities, they told us that approximately 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, a group of 32 beings descended to our world, and they were or descended on the planet. And they were or descended in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, and with their technology they opened up. And there they founded an intraterrestrial city where they would dwell, and finally this city was known as the mythical city of Shambhala through the myths and legends of India, Tibet, Asia. Later, they, with their technology, opened other tunnels and galleries that run through the entire planet and founded other intraterrestrial cities. And inside these intraterrestrial cities, they kept all the archives of human knowledge, all the information and technology of civilizations that existed in the past and that also unfortunately disappeared or were forgotten in history. The Cave of the Stems would be an entrance to this subway world and would be connected with an intraterrestrial city that had also been founded a long time ago by extraterrestrial beings. So this subway world has a connection and an origin in the first place with extraterrestrial civilizations.
Well, and here at Star Trek, I want to remind you, I'm a person who likes the subject, but really the one who gets deeply into this subject is Edison. I thank him deeply because he does the research, he gets the interviews. Beyond that, they have a group where they share, they do seminars many times, they have places to go. So we also leave you Edison's social networks in case you need to connect with them, because they really do very special things. And within that group, Edison has precisely these confreres, I would say, who also have questions for who brings us a question today, Edison.
Well, one of our viewers who is part of the contact groups, her name is Carmen. She is a doctor by profession, and she is a spiritual coach. That is, she is a retired physician, and she is a spiritual coach. So, she wants to ask Raphael Calderon a question.
That is correct. So, Mrs. Carmen, go ahead.
What is the origin of the subterranean or intraterrestrial? And I would also like to know.
In 1969, Juan Morris made a public record in the city of Guayaquil, announcing the treasure he had found in the Cave of the Stalks. Among other things, he claims to have found hundreds of metal sheets, including gold, where it would be written in symbols. The true history of humanity would be a metallic library that would be made by an ancient culture where the origin of the human being was recorded. On the other hand, Morris also claims to have found more than 1,000 statues in gold of ancient kings of disappeared civilizations, and on the other hand, also antediluvian animals, among other things later. Also, Morris, within his discoveries, says that this civilization that inhabits the interior of caves took refuge 12,000 years ago in the interior of the caves to survive a cataclysm. In order to survive a cataclysm or a great flood, once the waters had subsided, this civilization came to the surface and founded a culture, a people that later moved to different parts of the world. Giving rise to different cultures and civilizations, among others to the Sumerian culture, to the culture of the Mayas. And, according to Morris, the origin of the European peoples would be here in America. It is only a version that contradicts the official version that has taught us the official science. Unfortunately, this is not accepted, but according to Morris, here in the Andes of Ecuador, Peru and Bolivia would be the origin of the first civilizations that appeared on our planet.
And we continue with this restless public, with this group of people with whom Edison shares this, what shall we call this? This passion, right?
Today it is a passion.
This hobby, this anxiety to know a little bit more, to understand a little bit more, because we know and we really sense that we come from the stars and we travel to the stars. That we come from the stars and we travel to the stars. Now, who is going to ask the question? Present it to us. Okay.
Administrative Engineer Adriana Molina would like to ask Raphael Calderon a question, a very interesting question about the Cueva de los Tayos.
Hello, thank you very much for sharing with us all this valuable knowledge. The question I have today is, what was the treasure that was found in the cave of the Tayos, and why do we say that it is related to the Sumerian culture or the Anunnaki?
In the different experiences that we had in the Cave of the Stems, always by invitation of these beings from space, they told us that in the Cave of the Stems there was a treasure of the Anunnaki. These beings told us that in the Cave of the Stalks, evidently today there is still this metallic library kept, and in the interior of the earth and guarded by... But they also told us that the real treasure that exists in the Cave of the Stalks is not the metallic plates of gold, but the knowledge that these plates keep, and that the purpose of these trips is the knowledge that these plates keep in the Cave of the Stalks. And that the purpose of these trips, these visits that we had made, was that we have access to this knowledge that speaks of our origins, that speaks of our history, and that speaks that we are related to the beings of the stars beyond what we could imagine. In this information that is kept in the Cave of the Stalks, because it tells us that these beings of space, in their process of evolution, stagnated. They did not evolve beyond the level they had reached. And this is because they gave way more to a technological, scientific, mental development, and left aside the emotions and the feelings. They became a kind of scientists, of very cold people without emotion, without feeling. Then they did not to get out of that stagnation. They created us, they intervened in the appearance of the human being, and they sowed the seeds of the human beings, and they sowed life here on earth. So we are the product of extraterrestrial life sowing, of stellar shipwrecks, of genetic interventions, and even of miscegenation. That is, some of them have come to mix with human beings, and as a result of these mixtures, we, the current human beings, have emerged. Then we were created to teach them to feel superior emotions, emotions that allow them to get out of this evolutionary stagnation in which they are in. Emotions such as love, compassion, and charity, which are necessary to have access to higher levels of consciousness.
Edison, how marvelous to be able to make as a focus. It is wonderful to have Mr. Raphael Calderon, who was there and who shares his knowledge with us. As always, when these things happen, one has more questions than answers, right? I want to know more. I would like to go. Thank you very much, Edison, for this guest you brought us and for this research.
Well, Raphael Calderon is a very special person. He is a person very open to the public. He is an explorer sought after by filmmakers. That is, filmmakers to go down to the Cueva de los Tayos to discover what is there. In short, we are very grateful to Raphael Calderon for heeding our call.
If I were him, well, I am a film director with Raphael Calderon, Indiana Jones, right? Wonderful. Don't forget, we are in permanent movement. Our Earth moves all the time. Our solar system moves. We move within the solar system. We are travelers who like to travel.
To the stars.